Now the output you'll get if you reload might not exactly be what you want, because it actually yields 14 here instead of 0. But if you take a closer look at your code, that makes sense, because current result is 0 here, but then we calculate a new current result. So if I then use current result here, I of course take this current result and not the one I had up here. The reason for that is simple. Your JavaScript code gets executed from top to bottom. Actually, your HTML file gets parsed from top to bottom by the browser. And if you then import some JavaScript in there, well, that file gets evaluated and executed by the browser. And the code in there also gets executed from top to bottom. And that's the default JavaScript behavior. And hence, of course, if you do something in this line and then you use it in the line thereafter, you get the result from this line and not the result from the first line. It would be pretty bad if that would be the case, because then you could never do anything in your code. So to print 0 here, we would either have to do this before we execute this line, or store this initial value in another variable. And that's actually where we could use a constant. Let's say we're writing a program here where we want to initialize our current result with a default result value. And I'm naming this constant here, default result. You could pick any name you want. Now I'm using the const keyword to indicate that the value I store in here will never change. And I store 0 in here. Now we can use the default result here to initialize the variable. Yes, you can initialize a variable with the value of another variable or of another constant, and that's exactly what I'm doing here. The result of that is, if we now change current result, we can do that because that's a variable created with let. We couldn't change default result. So if I would try to do that here, and I now save this, you will actually see 0 here because our script broke. And you can see that in an even better way if you go to the developer tools here in Chrome, which I recommend that you use. You find those in the view menu and then developer tools, or by using the shortcut you see there. Now, what are these developer tools? I'll have a whole module after this module where we dive deeper into them and what you can do with them. In general, that's simply a tool built into the browser, which you don't typically see or use if you're using the browser as a normal, user. But as a developer, this is a special feature built into the browser that helps us understand our code, look behind the scenes, have some insights in how our code executes, trace and fix possible errors, and also see error messages or info messages being output here. So these are the developer tools, a crucial feature which do not just exist in Chrome. Firefox and Edge also have developer tools built in. Chrome just has very good ones, and therefore that will be the browser I use in this course. But again, I'll have a whole module where we dive a bit deeper into developer tools and what we can do with them after this module. And in these tools, if you go to the console here, so to console, you should see an error, assignment to constant variable. That's a problem. Your browser complains about it because that's not allowed. So that's not allowed, but assigning to current result is allowed because that's a variable. But since I now store this default result, which I then use to initialize current result, I can also refer to this down there when I output my text or when I generate my text. We can refer to it here and here, so I'm referring to default result in 2 places of my code. I'm never changing it though, because that wouldn't be allowed. Now we introduced a constant, and you might be wondering if we're not implicitly still changing the constant with our code. Because I initialize current result with the value which is stored in my constant, and since I thereafter change current result, you could think that implicitly we also change the constant, right? Because we set those equal in this line. But it's important to understand that indeed we are not changing the constant here, because here we're copying the value that's in the constant into this brand new variable. So if we thereafter change the variable, we're changing the copy. The original constant and its value are untouched if we then change the variable. That's something important to keep in mind here or to understand. And therefore now if we reload, we see this result and we see the correct text representation of this calculation, because we're now using this correctly and we're building a text with our default value which never changes. So this shows us constants and variables in action. It shows us operators, both used with numbers and also with text. And we got something on the screen. Not too bad to get started with.